Back on the David Pakman Show, giving away an iPad just minutes away. You can hear the David Pakman Show on the go if you've got an iPhone or Android phone. Download the Stitcher Smart Radio app and put in promo code DAVID. You'll be entered to win $100 and also be supporting the David Pakman Show, which is really what everybody should want to be and should be doing. Let's get right to our interview with Dr. Darrel Ray. We spoke to him just before the start of today's show. Darrel Ray is an organizational psychologist, consultant, and author of The God Virus, How Religion Infects Our Lives and Culture, and he's also founder of the organization Recovering from Religion. Dr. Ray, this is fantastic. I'm so glad to speak to you. I have so many questions. You did this study which involved 14,500 respondents, and tell me, what was the goal of doing the study, and then what did you find out?
Well, we were looking at 6 hypotheses, but the overall goal was just to find out what's going on in the secular community. As most people know, almost all religions are pretty consumed with sex. And we just want to know what happens when you leave. I guess the biggest thing that we found was the level of guilt that people experience around their sex or sexuality drops amazingly. I mean, in other words, secularists just don't seem to have much guilt once they left religion.
Well, I would argue probably a lot of more religious people would say that's the problem with atheists, right? They don't feel guilty about the stuff they're doing, one of which would be having sex.
Exactly. But we have to remember, it doesn't matter whether you're Christian or Mormon or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist. Every religion seems consumed with sex and sexuality, and they all have their own unique little twist on it. But what they found is that sex keeps you coming back. And I talk about this in my book, The God Virus. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to do the research. I talk about the concept of the guilt cycle. And it's a new concept. I don't think anybody's ever read about or written about it before I was writing about it. The guilt cycle is pretty simple. It's that religion teaches you the disease and then gives you a false cure for that disease. So religion teaches you guilt and then turns around and says, oh, but we can absolve you of that guilt if you just come to our particular church.
Now, so your background is, you know a lot about this. You were actually raised a fundamentalist Christian, is that right? I mean, now I think you consider yourself an atheist, but that was your upbringing, fundamentalist Christian?
Very much so. My parents even became missionaries. My grandfather was a country church minister. My other grandfather was chairman of the board of a very conservative church. I mean, I've got relatives that are missionaries and ministers even today. So yeah, it's pretty strong in my family.
So how do you end up, I mean, I spoke, interestingly enough, you're in Kansas. I spoke with Nathan Phelps, who's one of the sons of Fred Phelps, of course, the God Hates Fags church. He left, and he told this incredible story about leaving at midnight on his 18th birthday. And it's an unusual story in the sense that, much the same way that one's politics often mirror those of their parents, I think religion even more so tends to. How did you end up leaving?
Well, Nathan is actually a friend of mine. He's actually been to my house. We have a kind of interesting relationship, but swapping stories and such. It was a long process for me. My family did the best they could, and their religion was an important part of it. I don't hold any grudges or anything against my family. I just, at one point in time, I went into the ministry. I have a master's degree in religion. From Scarrett College for Christian Workers before I went on to get my doctorate at Vanderbilt and in psychology. And I just, after going through 2 years of that stuff, I realized I couldn't tell somebody else to believe what I didn't believe. So it was a slow process. I also had family, had kids, lots of very religious in-laws, all that stuff that keeps you just can't hardly leave. And so I finally was able to make the break after I got divorced, and I was able to get some perspective outside of having to go to church every Sunday. I mean, it was almost unheard of that somebody would not go to church every Sunday in my family.
So then
that wasn't.
Yeah. So eventually you become an atheist. You do this study. Now you can understand why many would say, well, you're coming at this from a very particular perspective. So when you say, as many of the headlines do, atheists have the best sex lives, you can understand why people would say, well, hold on a second. This guy is looking for this particular answer. He's already bought into one side of the argument.
Well, that's the criticism. But I'm a scientist first. I'm not an ex-religionist or an atheist. I want to know the truth. I'm after what's the real facts out there. I'm not trying to support my opinion one way or the other. And that's why there was so many surprises. We had a number of different things. But one of the checks, we have several checks, David, in our research. Yeah, 14,500 people filled it out. Almost 10,000 completed it. We have to just say that there's two different numbers here. And so it's over a 65% completion rate. And we had 69 questions. It took about an hour for people to fill this out online. And we had no control over who took it any more than other sex researchers have control. So one of the biggest criticisms we get is that it wasn't randomized. Well, I defy you to find a randomized sexual study. It's just not possible.
Sure. As we know, I interviewed Paul Cameron, the incredible anti-gay, ex-gay type activist, and he once had assumptions based on 17 people filling out a survey he personally gave them. So certainly we have to look at that information. He still stood by those results, by the way. You know, the thing that isn't part of this study that I would be interested to compare to is what is the sexual satisfaction of people who are still practicing their original religion? Because we're looking at people who have left their religion. And it would be interesting to have those other numbers to compare to.
It would be, but you know, if you put a survey up on the Baptist Church's website and said answer these 69 questions, betting we wouldn't get a very high participation rate, because some of the questions we ask are pretty wild with respect to religionists. You know, like when did you start masturbating? Well, you're not supposed to be masturbating if you're a Baptist or a Catholic. So. We probably wouldn't be able to get people to respond too well.
And how ironic, by the way, that there's 69 questions in this test, but we'll leave that for a different day. Can you address a little bit?
We did not intend that.
Can you address any specific sexual practices more common among Mormons we should be keeping an eye out now that Mitt Romney is a Republican frontrunner?
Well, if you've looked at the survey, you'll notice something. And one of the internal checks is there a difference by denomination in guilt level? One of the questions we asked was, when you were still religious, how much guilt were you taught? And a scale of 1 to 10. Excuse me. Well, what we found is we could actually classify groups or denominations by how much they used guilt. Well, you may be surprised to know, but Catholics, of course, are the ones that everybody says is the most guilt-ridden religion. Our research shows something different. Our research actually shows the number one most guilt-ridden religion among the 14,500 people we questioned is Mormonism. So, yeah, there's some stuff there. And what we found some fascinating stuff. We found that Unitarians are the least guilt-ridden people in our whole sample, even less guilty than atheists and agnostics, which is interesting.
And where do Jews figure on that scale?
Jews were very much on the low end, but we have to remember we probably got a lot of cultural Jews in our sample, people who are raised pretty secular to begin with. I doubt if very former Orthodox Jews filled out our survey.
And you know, it's interesting because my producer feels an incredible amount of guilt when it comes to sexual activity, but it's not so much because of the religion. It's more he just feels bad for the women that are subjected to his advances. You know.
Well, our research didn't look at that in detail.
That would be the next study, I think. So in general, you're not saying that you can say specifically that atheists have the best sex lives, but what seems to be very clear is that the amount of guilt associated with sexual activity seems to decrease significantly when not bound by the teachings of a particular religion.
You captured it perfectly. That's exactly what we say. And those darn headlines, you know, journalists that haven't even read the report say that atheists have better sex. It's just, we didn't say that. We say you have less guilt around sex. That probably, I would guess it leads to better sex, but I can't prove that. That wasn't what I was studying. We didn't go into anybody's bedroom. We didn't count orgasms. We didn't count the number of orgasms. We did look at other research, though, and there is some other research not directly related to religion. And one of the criticisms, of course, is that you're testing a bunch of atheists. But a lot of the people who fill this out were very dedicated to a religion at one point in time. We had Seventh-day Adventists, we had Baptists, we had Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Catholics. We had them all. So there's quite a bit of former religiosity here. And some of these people were Sunday school teachers and going to church 3 and 4 times a week. They were very dedicated to their religion. So the questions we asked we're around, well, okay, how did this work for you when you were religious versus how when you left? And we were able to compare all these different, I think we had 28 different religions, self-identified religions in this sample. So now we can discriminate between these and find out, what are the teachings, kind of the focus of each one of these. And we found some real interesting results. For example, it didn't matter how religious you were. Some of these people had even gone through abstinence-only training and that sort of stuff when they were still religious. It did not matter how religious you were. You started masturbating about the same time as a non-religiously raised child.
I did read that, and I encourage everybody to go check out the study. I looked through it, and it's fascinating. We've been speaking with Darrel Ray, organizational psychologist, author of The God Virus, and I think the next study that you should do is let's look at the bizarre sexual practices of anti-gay zealots. I think that my audience would be fascinated by that. Dr. Darrel Ray, great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David.
Okay, take care. All right, on today's bonus show, Chris Hansen from Dateline NBC caught cheating by a hidden camera. That would certainly be ironic or ironic, to quote Michelle Bachmann. Mark Halperin suspended by MSNBC for calling President Obama a dick. And some new tennis grunt silencing technology on the BBC. Apparently, they're taking the tennis grunting very, very seriously over there, Lewis. So davidpakman.com/membership. We'll give away the iPad just minutes away, and plenty more to talk about. Stay tuned. Back after this.